we've got the steam going right now. We have to power this. We've got this ball going uphill. We've got to keep going. So there was a little disagreement early on about how much we should work and how hard we should work.
The man who helped create one of the greatest rock songs in history was suddenly erased from the band he built. And you're about to find out why. He co-wrote Hotel California, shaped the sound of Eagles, and delivered the guitar solo that defined a generation. Then, in 2001, Don Felder received a letter that ended his career with the band overnight, followed by lawsuits, silence, and a feud that never truly ended. So why was he pushed out after helping build rock history itself? And what really happened behind the scenes that turned former bandmates into lifelong enemies? Join us as we uncover the untold truth Don Felder's just revealed about the darker side of the Eagles.
In the pantheon of rock and roll, few bands have soared as high as the Eagles. Quite simply, they're one of the most enduring rock groups of all time.
The moment they erased his voice. Don Felder did not start his career inside a band that was already built. He was brought in as a hired gun in 1974, added to an Eagles session to lay down some guitar tracks, and was good enough that they kept calling him back until the line between session player and full band member collapsed entirely. He was made a full financial partner with the original 4 members. Equal split and no tier system, which means that every dollar earned by the Eagles would be divided the same way among everyone holding a stake. And Don Felder held one. He understood the arrangement to be permanent, foundational, and non-negotiable, the bedrock of the professional relationship he was building with Frey and Henley. During the recording of Hotel California, which ironically became one of the most successful records of all time, Don Felder intended to sing lead vocals on his original composition, Victim of Love. The rest of the band was not impressed with what he recorded. While Felder was out having dinner with the band's manager, Irving Azoff, the rest of the group wiped Felder's vocals from the track and re-recorded them using Don Henley instead. Felder never forgave them for this. He walked back in, and the decision had already been executed. His performance was gone, and Henley's was there instead. And the explanation, delivered without apology by Frey and Henley in their own words years later in the 2013 documentary, was that Felder's vocals simply did not come up to band standards. In the History of the Eagles documentary, Glenn Frey said, "Don Felder, for all of his talents as a guitar player, was not a singer." Don Henley agreed, and also added that it simply did not come up to band standards. They said it publicly, on camera, in a documentary he was pointedly excluded from, with the casual authority of men who had long since stopped considering whether Felder's feelings about any decision were worth factoring in. And they were not entirely wrong about the vocals, because Henley's version of Victim of Love is extraordinary. But the manner in which the decision was made, the secretive erasure of a bandmate's performance while he sat unsuspectingly at a restaurant table, permanently altered the dynamic inside the Eagles. Felder left that recording session understanding something about his position in the band that no one had chosen to say directly. And if the erasure of his Victim of Love vocals was the moment that changed his understanding of where he stood, the concert that ended the band's first era would leave no room for misunderstanding at all. Let's get into the details. The night they threatened each other on stage. By 1980, the Eagles had spent 18 months recording The Long Run, a session described by almost everyone present as an endurance test of interpersonal hostility sustained through chemistry, creative disagreement, and the specific contempt that develops between people who know each other too well to maintain professional courtesy. The tension had been building for years. Felder had been watching Frey and Henley accumulate creative and commercial control over the band's direction, in ways that left him and the other members feeling increasingly managed rather than consulted. He had been pushed into a corner on Victim of Love. He had watched the band shift from the democratic partnership he had joined into something that functioned more like a corporation with two principal shareholders who happened to also perform in it. At a concert in Long Beach, California, for Senator Alan Cranston on July 31, 1980, known as the Long Night at Long Beach, things hit a breaking point. The animosity between Felder and Frey boiled over before the show began. After Felder said, "You're welcome, I guess," to Cranston and his wife, which offended Frey. Frey angrily confronted Felder, and the pair began to threaten beatings throughout the show. Felder recalls Frey telling him during Best of My Love, "I'm gonna kick your ass when we get off the stage. Only 3 more songs until I kick your ass, pal," was what Frey alleged Felder said back. It was their last show for some 14 years. The Eagles broke up that night, not formally, but effectively and completely. They would not perform together again until 1994, when the combination of nostalgia, commercial opportunity, and whatever residual bond existed between them made the Hell Freezes Over reunion feel like the right decision. But even then, the seeds of the second rupture were being planted while the cameras for the MTV special were still rolling. How does a band reunite across 14 years of silence, go on to sell out arenas globally, and still somehow manage to end up worse than where they started? The answer involves a money structure that Felder had signed off on during the reunion and immediately started to regret. The Hell Freezes Over deal that set up the ending. Even when the Eagles reconvened for Hell Freezes Over in 1994, Felder's lawsuit later argued that the seeds of another split were being sown. He said they had previously divided all band revenue equally, but that Frey and Henley demanded a new structure favoring their chart-proven partnership, and threatened to fire Felder before the reunion ever got underway unless he agreed. He initially signed off, but in the ensuing years, arguments over money only worsened. He signed because the alternative was being excluded from the reunion entirely, which would have meant watching from the outside as the band he had spent the best years of his career building made hundreds of millions of dollars on a tour he had no part of. So he signed a deal he considered unfair, under pressure he described as coercive, and spent the next 7 years watching the gap between what Henley and Frey earned and what everyone else earned grow wider with each new project. He complained that they had founded a separate company to handle a career retrospective box, set without involvement from Felder, Walsh, or Timothy B. Schmidt. In the lawsuit filing that followed, Felder said the greed of Henley and Frey became more insatiable with each new project. The Selected Works box set was the breaking point. It had sold 267,000 copies by the time of the legal filings and earned over $16 million. Felder, Walsh, and Schmidt had been excluded from ownership of the separate company that handled the project's finances, which meant they were receiving payments without holding any stake in the entity generating those payments. When Felder began demanding access to financial records, access he was legally entitled to as a partner in Eagles Limited, the response from Frey and Henley was not accommodation. It escalated. Felder alleged that from the 1994 Hell Freezes Over tour onward, Henley and Frey had insisted that they each receive a higher percentage of the band's profits, whereas the money had previously been split in 5 equal portions. Felder also accused them of coercing him into signing an agreement under which Henley and Frey would receive 3 times more of the Selected Works proceeds than himself. Felder had watched the equal partnership he had been promised in 1974 gradually restructured until the numbers no longer bore any relationship to the original agreement. On February 6, 2001, he received a letter from manager Irving Azoff. It told him he was fired, and it set in motion a legal battle that would consume the next 6 years of his life. How did it unravel?
So finally, I don't know who sent who a legal notice or whatnot, but it just came down that there was no, and you're fired. So that's the way that happened.
The lawsuits and the settlement. On February 6, 2001, Felder was fired from the Eagles. He responded by filing 2 lawsuits alleging wrongful termination, breach of implied-in-fact contract, and breach of fiduciary duty, reportedly seeking $50 million in damages for each claim. His argument was structural and specific. He had been brought in as a full partner, not an employee. A partner, in his understanding of the arrangement, could not simply be terminated with a letter from a manager. The firing letter was legally invalid because the relationship it was attempting to end was not an employer-employee relationship, it was a partnership, and partnerships require a different legal mechanism for dissolution. Henley and Frey's counter-argument was that there was a stipulation in the partnership that any member could be fired for any number of reasons, and the one they pointed to as reason for Felder's termination was disruption of band activities. From their side, rumors began to surface that Felder was refusing to tour and not showing up for rehearsals, as well as causing problems in the studio. The countersuit came quickly. Henley, Frey, and Azoff filed their own action, and then did something that revealed exactly how seriously they took the threat Felder's book posed to their version of history. They sued to prevent publication of his autobiography. They tried and failed to keep Felder from publishing his autobiography, which became a New York Times bestseller. The suits were settled out of court, but not the hard feelings. Plans for a tell-all Felder autobiography led to yet another lawsuit, as Frey and Henley attempted to stop its publication. The memoir was ultimately delayed for a couple of years, arriving in 2009 as Heaven and Hell: My Life in the Eagles. In it, he derisively refers to Frey and Henley as the gods. The attempt to suppress the book failed. Heaven and Hell was published in 2008, became a New York Times bestseller, and said in print what Felder had been saying in legal filings for years, that the Eagles had been running as a 2-man operation since at least the Hotel California era, that the equal partnership was a fiction maintained for public consumption, and that the men who had built that fiction had used it to extract as much financial benefit as possible from the people who believed in it. The legal actions were settled out of court for an undisclosed fee, speculated to be tens of millions. Because it was settled out of court, Felder also got to retain his due royalties. The money was presumably substantial, but the settlement carried its own wound: the permanent silence it imposed on both sides, preventing Felder from publicly confirming what he had won, and preventing the full financial reality of the Eagles' internal architecture from ever becoming part of the official record. And then, Glenn Frey died, and the handshake that Felder had been quietly hoping for became permanently unavailable. What led to his death, and how did Felder react to it?
I do want to celebrate, we all do, the life of Eagles co-founder Glenn Frey. So many celebrating the rock and roll legend this morning. He passed away at the age of 67.
The death that closed the door on everything. In 2016, Felder told the Associated Press that he felt an unbelievable sorrow when he learned about Glenn Frey's death. He said, "I had always hoped somewhere along the line he and I would have dinner together, talking about old times and letting it go with a handshake and a hug." Glenn Frey died on January 18, 2016, from complications of rheumatoid arthritis and acute ulcerative colitis. He was 67 years old, and the specific grief that Felder expressed publicly in the days after was not the performed sentimentality of a man trying to appear magnanimous. It was the real grief of someone who had spent 15 years hoping for a conversation that was now never going to happen. A conversation in which two men who had helped each other build something extraordinary might have found a way to acknowledge that the thing they built was worth more than the fight they ended it with. Frey and Felder never buried the hatchet. The guitarist admitted to the press that he had hoped the two would let the past go and instead reminisce about the good old days, but it was not meant to be. In a strange way, his regret is indicative of the crux of the Eagles. Being in the band was like running a competitive marathon, a task filled with jostling and hardship, where it was a relief for it all to finish, but not something you'd regret. The unresolved relationship with Frey is the most human and most permanent consequence of everything that happened between 2001 and 2016. The money was settled. The royalties were retained. The book was published. The legal language of wrongful termination and breach of fiduciary duty was replaced by the sealed language of an out-of-court agreement. But there was no mechanism for settling the human part of it, no legal process that could produce the dinner table conversation Felder wanted. And Frey's death removed the possibility permanently. Felder's relationship with Don Henley has been somewhat different. In a 2025 Sirius XM interview, Felder said of Henley, "There are times here and there along the way where we bump into each other, and we're very cordial about it. Very cordial. Two words that contain an entire universe of complicated history, held at arm's length by a professional willingness to coexist without relitigating what cannot be changed." So what does Don Felder's life look like at 78, on the other side of all of it? Life after the Eagles and what 78 looks like. Don Felder was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998 with Eagles and was inducted into the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum in 2016. He is known for his performances using Gibson Les Paul and Gibson EDS 1275 electric guitars. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction happened 3 years before the firing, which creates the specific irony of a man being officially recognized as part of American musical history by the same institution that would soon be watching him fight the band he was inducted with over money and royalties, and the basic question of what the partnership they had all entered was actually worth to the people running it. He has continued performing as a solo artist. His solo catalog includes the album Road to Forever, released in 2012, and he has toured as a featured solo act while occasionally appearing at Eagles tribute events and classic rock festivals. His net worth is estimated at approximately $60 million. Not the fortune of someone who walked away from the Eagles with nothing, but considerably less than it would have been under the equal split that the original partnership had promised him in 1974. In a 2008 interview with Howard Stern, Felder affirmed that he remained friends with fellow former Eagles members Bernie Leadon and Randy Meisner. When asked if he still had any contact with Glenn Frey or Don Henley, Felder stated that the only replies he received were from their respective attorneys. Bernie and Randy, the two original members who also left the Eagles before its commercial peak, and who also experienced the specific gravitational pull of Frey and Henley's control over the band's direction, were the relationships that survived. The people who had gone through what he went through, who understood from the inside what the Eagles actually were when the song stopped and the business started, those were the people he kept in his life. At 78, Don Felder still plays guitar the way he has played it since he was a teenager in Gainesville, Florida. He still has the double-neck Gibson. He still has the royalties from Hotel California, the song whose guitar structure he wrote and whose riff is arguably the most recognized in American popular music. He still performs it live, which means the audience still hears the music he made regardless of who owns the surrounding narrative. What he does not have is the conversation he wanted with Glenn Frey, and he also doesn't have the acknowledgement from the people most positioned to give it that the equal partnership was real and that its dismantling was wrong. What he has instead is a book that told the story on his terms, a settlement that validated his legal position, royalties that survived the corporate history of everything that followed, and the specific, complicated piece of a man who stopped waiting for justice to arrive from outside and found his own version of it instead. The dark side of the Eagles was never the music. The music was extraordinary. The dark side was the architecture of power that built underneath the music, while everyone was too busy listening to the songs to notice what was happening in the rooms where the money was being divided. Don Felder noticed, but it came at a cost, the band. And at 78, he has finally said so clearly enough that nobody has to wonder anymore. What do you think Don Felder deserved at the end of all of this? The money, the acknowledgement, or simply the dinner table conversation with Glenn Frey that never happened? And does knowing the full story of what went on inside the Eagles change the way Hotel California sounds to you now? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.